People gave it a new word, pictogram. And how could we call that a crop circle anymore, right? That was a pictogram. And people, thousands of people came from all over the world to go inside and just wonder, what in the world is going on here? People from all over the world. Now, and this is the same formation, by the way, just seen from different angles. And I would like to know why this formation, which was done in a dry lake bed in Oregon, there's no vegetation here. This is not a crop circle, right? It's a design etched, in the dry lake bed, in the desert, 13 miles of lines, exactly replicating a sacred Sri Yantra symbol of the Hindu faith, which is what this is and this is. These are two representations of the Sri Yantra, 9 perfectly interlocking triangles. This design is so sophisticated that modern mathematicians are impressed that millennia ago, when this was conceived, before there was any modern mathematics, and they're impressed that they would even be able to come up with such a thing. But people did that, and it was intended to be a way that you would, if you were a devotee of Hinduism, you would focus on the dot right in the center, and that would elevate your consciousness. It would help you to achieve enlightenment, just like saying a mantra or meditating. It's a form of meditation. Well, darned if this exact pattern wasn't replicated on a very impressive large scale, right? Because you can see there's people right in the middle. You can barely see them. 13 miles overnight with no explanation. Why was this not on the front page of every newspaper in the world? And then you go on to the next year, 1991, if you were the warden of Barbary Castle and you heard this loud sound, the most colossal roar coupled with a pulsing hum at 3:30 in the morning, sounds like, planes going over, 100 planes going over, you would wonder what is going on here. And sure enough, there was something very significant. This formation, which is the one illustrated on the cover of that book that I referred to earlier, my first introduction to the subject, Freddie Silva's book, Secrets in the Fields, that was what happened. And could this be some kind of three-dimensional representation of a two-dimensional object? Or, excuse me, the opposite, two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional pyramid or something of the sort. One idea is that, well, that's what he thought he heard, this colossal roar, and he compared it to the sound of 100 planes going overhead, but there weren't 100 planes going overhead. I mean, he was there, right? He looked up in the sky, there was nothing there.
And when he woke up in the morning, he found that?
Well, he was awake anyway. It was his duty as the warden, I guess, to be awake through the night. And so yes, that was discovered the next morning. The same, just a few hours later, after hearing that sound, that formation was discovered. Now,
it couldn't have been a UFO because they don't make any noise.
I hear what you're saying. But what's interesting to me is that already you've seen several different phenomena, on this one, but probably not any of the others. This loud noise, okay, was featured, shall we say. There was a soundtrack for this one, but then there was a strange white substance in another one. There was the red light in another one. There was if you're someone who, you're a fireworks artist or something, and you're thinking, okay, how am I going to wow them this time, for the 4th of July, and you're going to cook up something new? That's my impression of what's happening here. They quote unquote, keep on coming up with new things to impress us and to get us to really pay attention, right? Yep.
Did you say that under all of these manifestations there's salt or chalk? Or is that just one place that there's chalk?
They're not all over chalk. There's some over green sand, some over neither. But so there's no one predictable geographical explanation. Now, talk to us, someone tramped out in the fields. You see that crude, right? Those letters, talk to us, in letters right there. Okay, someone wanted to have these things explained and figured, well, that would be the best way to appeal for an explanation from above, you know, where these things seem to be coming from in a field. And here is the answer that came in a field. And in 1991, in August, Gerald Hawkins thought it was Latin, and he interpreted it as, I am against acts of cunning. Simon Burton said, I have hidden at present. He also thought it was Latin, but he saw something different. And two other people thought it was in Hebrew. The Creator wise and loving, said one. A new breed of people, said the other. I don't know which of them is right. Maybe all four of them are right to a certain extent. But clearly, the answer is, we aren't going to tell you exactly what we're saying. This is a challenge. Much like finding those notes of the major scales, this is a challenge for you to understand and to use, you know, to be curious, to use every faculty you have, whether it's your reasoning or your intuition or whatever, to try to understand these.
Was that like the next day in the same place?
Yes, yeah, the next day. Now, back in 1991, you might remember that Doug and Dave, right, two fellows in their 60s, stepped forward and admitted, quote unquote, admitted that they had done all the formations to date. Now think of what you've just seen, and there were others, you know, I've left out a lot, you know, but those are just representative. How, you know, the men who conned the world were, well, shouldn't we ask whether they were trying to con us by saying that they had made them all? And should we wonder why the newspapers were so eager to dismiss the whole thing as being done by a couple of 60-plus-year-old guys who are out to have a good time? Because that's what their claim was. Oh, they just came up with the idea at a pub one night. Oh, let's have a good time. And this is how they claimed they did it. Really? You know, perfectly straight lines at dead of night using a wire dangling from a baseball cap to serve as a sighting device. But they would have had to jump or pole vault into standing crop. And their wives never caught them in the act. Okay? Never noticed that they were gone in the middle of the night. And furthermore, this is an example of their artwork. How impressive is that to you? Not very, right? Not very. So on with the show. These are some of the crop circle features. Plants bent an inch above soil and gently laid down, geometrically precise patterns. Light burn marks at the base of stems. Altered cellular structure and soil chemistry. Discrepancies in background radiation. Alteration of the local electromagnetic field. Depletion of the local watershed. Sometimes there's less water below than somehow water has dried up or been used in the creation of them. Dowsable, long-lasting energy patterns, measured effects on the human biological field. We'll be talking about all these in the course of this. So here's a woman, Nancy Talbot. I have had several conversations with her. She lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I consider her to be the world's foremost expert on crop circles because she does real research. She compares the plants inside the formations to the plants outside. She takes the soil and, you know, she and her partners analyzes the soil. And she's had many other experiences, which I'll get to later, which she would never have believed herself if she hadn't had them herself. So in any event, the BLT, Burke, Levengood, and Talbot, BLT Research, is a website which I recommend, bltresearch.com. T is Nancy Talbot, okay? And this is what BLT Research has done. They've taken plants from the fields, and then one thing they discovered is that the abnormally enlarged cell wall pits in the bract tissue. This is never seen in plants, except in plants that are in formations. Node elongation. These nodes seem to be stretched. Imagine if your elbow was stretched. I mean, it's just like, how in the world could something like that happen, you know, to a plant, that the node is stretched? This is the node right here. Or, and this is how the plants are actually bent in the fields, the node is stretched and bent. All right? So here's the bending of plant stem nodes towards the bottom of the stalks. And this fellow, who's a PhD, Ilcho Hasselhoff, a Dutch gentleman, decided that he would measure just how stretched are they, and he found out that the ones right in the center of the circles were stretched more than the ones towards the perimeter, and then he figured out, well, that must mean then that the source of energy that's stretching them must be a certain specific distance away, because if you hang a light bulb above a surface, well, it's brighter in the middle, and it's less bright because towards the edges, because there isn't as much light. The light is not as intense when it reaches the edge. So you see that he could determine exactly what that height was. I think it was something like 4 or 5 meters above that circle. So here's something else that happens to plant stalks. Sometimes whatever energy is visiting them seems to boil the sap inside those nodes, so that it's just gets too hot in there, and there has to escape somehow. The steam has to escape. So there are expulsion cavities that are discovered. Again, you never see these expulsion cavities in nodes anywhere in nature except in crop circles. And then some plants are bent which are simply unbendable. These, if you visit a field of the oilseed rape, which is the plant that canola oil is made from. And if you try to do this, if you try to bend, I mean, you can't treat a stalk like it's a pipe cleaner, can you? You can't just like bend it and expect for it to stay bent. The plant has other ideas, and the plant's going to go right back up, right? Or if you keep on bending it, it might snap. Those are the only two choices in terms of mechanical effects from attempts to bend. So how is it that these plants are in fact bent in the fields? Other effects noticed. Look at these stunted wheat seed heads in the formations compared to outside, because the plants are still living, but these, in this case, the corn kernels are stunted in the middle of the formation. And here, the corn kernels, when germinated, are simply not as vigorous as the corn kernels from outside the field. However, watch this. Exactly the opposite happened in a formation in Medina, New York in 1991. Corn kernels taken from the center significantly outperformed the control outside the. What was happening here? What energy had visited and in some cases, obviously, the energy was inhibiting the slides we just saw. But in this case, the energy had actually made them super seeds. They were more vigorous, and the ones on the edge were still a lot better than the ones outside, but not quite as good as the ones in the center. Again, that effect of, the ones in the center are getting the most energy, right? Isn't this something that scientists should be paying attention to, and to wonder, well, what are these energies that can make seeds so vigorous? Isn't this?
I'm surprised Monsanto hasn't gotten this.
And in fact, John Burke, the B of BLT, who is now deceased, but he did try to patent this idea and tried to find applications, practical applications for it. Here's another remarkable result. These seeds were taken from inside the formation, and they're synchronized. All of them are performing pretty much equally, are growing with equal vigor, compared to outside the formation. There's what you normally expect. Some seeds are more vigorous, others are less so. How is it that all of these seeds, having benefited from the energy, were almost synchronized in their growth? And as if that's not impressive enough, here we have a woman named Diane Conrad, who's a geologist and decided to look at the soil in this formation that happened in Canada, Alberta, Canada. And she realized when she measured the degree of crystallization, or greater ordering of the atoms inside the formation, that this degree of crystallization had never before been documented in surface soils. As a matter of fact, what you'd expect that crystallization to be where you'd expect to see that is in sedimentary rock, which has been exposed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, to both heat from the Earth's core and the massive pressure of tons of overlying rock. Now, if that kind of energy was actually visiting the field to transform the soils in that way, to create that degree of crystallization, then why wasn't all of the crop, in fact, that entire area around it, just incinerated? I mean, right? If we're talking about the heat from the Earth's core and the pressure from tons of overlying rock, wouldn't you think that, but I guess the riddle here is that even though that happened to the soils, whatever energy visited the formation to create the formation itself must have been so controlled, must have been so brief, okay, that the plants were just whoosh, laid down. In fact, eyewitness reports confirm this. There have been some 25 people who've seen crop circles happen, that it's very brief and very controlled. Now, furthermore, looking at the soils here, it looks as if something, this is the next year, where the previous year there had been a crop formation, and now the soils don't seem to be very fertile, or there's something, it seems to be something wrong. The crops aren't growing very well where there had been a formation. But in this case, it's the opposite. Look at that dark green color in the same area the previous year where there had been a crop circle. And as if that's not enough, let's look at this circle in the winter following a formation. Notice how the snow is melting less rapidly than outside. But the exact opposite is happening here. The snow is melting more rapidly over where there had been a formation. I have no idea why there are these variations in delayed reactions in the soil. Suffice it to say that, when I said earlier that maybe every one of them has a different footprint, maybe there are different effects that are being used, or maybe different elements that are being added to formations, all of which are meant to kind of impress us with the variety of these things.
You've got to ask those brothers how they're doing that.
You're asking how they're doing it.
You've got to ask those brothers how they're doing it.
Those two fellows. Yeah, they're not brothers, they're friends, but yeah, that would be nice to know how they would account for that. Here is the L of BLT, W.C. Levengood. He was analyzing these pebbles and plants in the crop circle that had iron fused onto them, and perhaps that iron was from a Pleiades meteor shower that was caught in the crop circle, making vortex of energy, and that then fused that iron onto the pebbles and the plants. Now, here's Busty Taylor, the pilot, photographer, crop circle researcher. He showed a video here, and people were watching it, and when one person said, "Wait a minute, I just saw a light cross the upper right-hand corner," and he had never noticed that light. So sure enough, when he saw it himself, I was gobsmacked, as he said.